Cheers, guys, and welcome to Uncle Scott's Pancast. In the old Pancast today, we're going to talk Costco and Sam's Club. Saw some deals there. Talk a little bit about Mauviel, a little bit about olive oil. Got an update on that Matfer carbon steel pan recall. We're going to talk a little bit about paella and more. Let's jump in and get started. I want to start with Costco and Sam's today. I was at both warehouse clubs yesterday doing a little shopping, and let's talk about Sam's first. They had California, 100% California Olive Ranch olive oil for $14.78 a liter. I thought that was a screaming deal. If you guys remember from a Pancast, it's been about 6 months ago now, I bought a case of the California Olive Ranch olive oil at Sam's, and a couple people got on to me and said, "What are you doing using that in your car engine? Why do you need so much?" Turns out that around here, we use about a liter of olive oil every 2 weeks. That was about 6 months ago, roughly. I bought that in March. It's September now. And when I bought it in March, it was $12.78. Now $14.78. And if you do a little math, that is about 15.6% higher on that olive oil now. In just 6 months, if you annualize that, that is over 30% inflation in olive oil. So is there hyperinflation in food prices? Maybe not in everything, but in olive oil, boy, that inflation is really up there. And also because I haven't bought any other olive oil in 6 months because I bought so much the last time, I haven't really been checking prices on it. I did check prices around, and the same olive oil at Walmart, right next door to Sam's Club, $27 for a liter. It's over $30 at lots of places, even at CaliforniaOliveRanch.com. And it was such a screaming deal at Sam's. I bought a case yesterday. I may go back and buy another case. If you look on these bottles, it tells you when it was harvested. So this was harvested in October, December of 2023. So it's still the most recent harvest and is good until later on in 2025. Now, Sam's Club, not a sponsor, although if you'd like to be, please do get in touch. I looked up on their website this morning and they're running a deal on memberships for $15 for the basic membership. If you buy 1 or 2 bottles of olive oil, that completely justifies a year membership at Sam's Club. Now, the other half of the big box battle is Costco. And what I saw at Costco yesterday that might interest you guys were these. These are Tramontina enamel cast iron Dutch ovens. They've got a 2-piece set, a 4-quart and a 6-quart with lids for $59, about $60 on those Tramontinas. I've had a Tramontina. This was my first Dutch oven I ever bought. And it's been, I think, well over 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago. And I used that Tramontina heavily for a decade or so before I kind of went off the deep end and got really into cookware. Now with the Tramontinas, they are at the value end of the spectrum. You definitely don't get the kind of brand prestige, if you're into that sort of thing, that you do with the Le Creuset or the Stoves or the European stuff. I also do have a lot of faith in the French manufacturing processes, especially when it comes to enameled cast iron. When you get a piece from China, you're going on a little bit of faith, perhaps a little bit more so than the stuff coming in from Europe, but a little bit more faith that everything is okay with the glaze and the paints, etc., etc., etc. That said, I don't use this guy as much anymore, but I used it for about 10 years and only grew 1 extra tail. Okay, let's quickly touch on the Matfer carbon steel recall issue. What has happened in the last couple of weeks is that America's Test Kitchen has put out an article on their website, and I highly encourage you to go to their website, search for Matfer, and read the entire article. I'm not going to mooch it here, but long story short, they did some testing on carbon steel pans and did kind of confirm that the Matfers can leach out some of those harmful substances. They are no longer recommending the Matfer carbon steel pans. They recommend Mauviel's instead. And it's kind of the end of an era a little bit. I think a lot of the carbon steel craze took off in America because America's Test Kitchen originally recommended the carbon steel pans. That's my wife saw their recommendation, got me one. That's how I got started in carbon steel. So it's a little bit, I don't know, it's just interesting. So a little bit of a change in the landscape there. After reading their article and after reading the recall from France and after talking to Matfer, I am still unclear as to how big of a deal this actually is. Now let's remember, the Matfer pans are not recalled in America. They've met all the European Union, EU standards. They met the French standards, but they did not meet, and they call it a region or a province. I'm not sure exactly the term, but it was essentially the equivalent of a state in America. One of those regions had a strict standard that Matfer pans did not meet. My question here is, are we going to judge all cookware by that? It was the province was called Isère. Are we going to judge all cookware by the standards of the province of Isère in France? Or are European Union standards or French standards good enough? Or American standards good enough? I don't really have the answer to this question. Matfer is still adamant that their pans are safe when used correctly. And that test that they failed was someone boiling an acidic solution in a carbon steel skillet for over 2 hours. And we all know you're not supposed to cook acid in a carbon steel pan. So I'm still unclear as to how big of a deal this actually is. The chromium, the arsenic, they say the health effects of those are cumulative. So if you cook in your Matfer pan once a week, is everything okay? If you cook in it every day for 10 years, is something bad going to happen? Matfer said they have not had any real world people say that they have been harmed by any of their pans. However, I would say just from a brand and product perspective, this is probably somewhere between a headache and a nightmare. I don't know. Now I'm going to throw out a suggestion here, and it's easy for me to do because I'm a small guy and this would be spending someone else's money. But a big company like America's Test Kitchen, or perhaps even, I hesitate to do this, but regulatory agency, I think they should test not only Matfer pans, I think they should test maybe all cookware. I bet cast iron has the same type issues as some of the carbon steel. I can't remember which manufacturer it was, but they were showing how they made their cast iron pans, and they just showed all this recycled metal. You could see like car engines and beams and whatever scrap metal they had, and they would melt that down, and that went into the iron for the cast iron pans. Is all that stuff tested? Or is every batch of cookware tested? I don't know, but I think as an industry, people need to decide what the standard is going to be and then apply that evenly to all cookware brands. It's not fair to judge one brand by what happens in one region of France. If we're going to do that, then every pan needs to be judged by the same standard. America's Test Kitchen, in their article, they say they now recommend Mauviel's, and I like Mauviel's. Well, I've reviewed a couple of Mauviel carbon steels around here, and they've gotten thumbs up. But they also said that the Mauviel they tested, it didn't leach any arsenic, but it did leach chromium, but met the European standards. My question here is, did it meet the Isère standards, or is it the same thing here? I just want to make sure before one brand gets trashed that we're all comparing apples to apples. So should you stop using your Matfer pans? That is a personal decision. I'm here trying to get as much good information out as possible. I've talked to Matfer. I've invited ATK on to come on and talk a little bit more in depth about the carbon steel, but I have not heard back from them. So they are more than welcome to come on. I've invited Matfer on. I'm still waiting to hear the results of the appeal. And I would like to see more test results for a wider variety of pans. And I would also like to know, have there been any real world health effects that anyone has come up with from using these pans? I haven't heard about that. So I am taking a wait and see attitude and doing nothing at the moment, which I'm actually pretty good at. Speaking of Mauviel, I put up a video the other day on how to unstick potatoes. It was called Stuck Taters, why potatoes stick and how to fix them. And in that video, one of the segments showed some potatoes just stuck like a duck in this Mauviel saute pan. Let's see, H4KN SL4K Hack and Slack wrote in and asked, isn't that a nice tri-ply fully clad pan? I wouldn't expect it to heat unevenly. This is actually a 5-ply pan, and it's a very high quality pan, and it cooks very evenly. It was heated evenly, just to the wrong temperature. So the problem was not with the pan, and I illustrated it in the video. Once I got it to the correct temperature, same pan, same bag of potatoes, same stove top, within a half an hour, the potatoes were non-stick, yet still brown very nicely. So the problem was not the pan, the problem was the cook. Also in that video, people were kind of complaining, or at least noting how much oil I was using. In one of the segments, the skillet potatoes, that was actually not seed oil, that was tallow, beef tallow. And I also note back on the Sam's Club here that Sam's is now carrying that Wagyu beef tallow. And the seed oils are just getting absolutely trashed on all the forums and the media these days, and people do seem to be going back to tallow. I got some now, and I'm kind of agnostic, I guess. I use the seed oil, so I admit it, but I also use the beef tallow from time to time. I noticed with the potatoes, people say that if you fry potatoes in the beef tallow, that they taste kind of like McDonald's fries used to back in the day when McDonald's and the other fast food restaurants used tallow. Now they use seed oil, and I do definitely notice a difference in flavor with the potatoes. You can definitely get a little bit more, I don't know what you call it, maybe a little bit more of a beefy type flavor on the potatoes. So definitely a difference with the tallow and the seed oil. Let's see, Jerry Rubinek 8905 writes in and asks, what butter do I use? I usually use Tillamook. I occasionally use Land O'Lakes, and then depending on the outrageousness of the prices, I will use Kirkland Costco butter from time to time as well. Let's see, Christine Davis, 5813, writes in with a deep fryer question. She's having some trouble frying some fish. Says she drops the fish in the fryer, the fish goes to the bottom of the basket, infuses to it, and she ends up losing the batter off the bottom of the fish. What can she do differently? Okay, what's happening here is she's putting a food with a wet batter into the basket and then lowering that into the oil. That batter is setting up, but it's setting up around the basket, so it just fuses, it just sticks to it. What you can do there, a couple different things you can do. First is lower the basket into the oil without the food in it, then lay the food out into the hot oil, give that batter a little bit of time to set up, and when it's done, then lift up the basket and it will pull the food out and nothing will be stuck to the basket. Sometimes what you can do is just not use the basket at all. It depends on if you have an immersion element in there and if the food is going to sink or not, of course. But you can just lay the food out into the oil with no basket in there and then use a little spider strainer to remove it when it's done. But that way you won't get any fusing to a basket. Campbell's Soup, been around for 155 years, tremendous amount of brand equity. They are thinking of changing their name, at least at the corporate level, to the Campbell's Company. And I'm sure this makes sense in boardrooms. I'm sure you got VPs and MBAs and people who like to talk in meetings. And I'm sure this all makes great sense on paper, because Campbell's Soup, not only do they make Campbell's Soup, they also own, they make the goldfish, the Pepperidge Farm goldfish, they make Swanson broth. They're kind of a conglomerate with a bunch of different supermarket, consumer packaged goods brands. And they're thinking that, well, maybe they need a more umbrella type name at the top. And they're going to change from Campbell's Soup to Campbell's Company. I think this is probably a bad idea. And just me, if someone says, well, this product, this company is owned by Campbell's Soup, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what that is. If someone says, well, this is owned by the Campbell's Company, I'm not sure exactly what the Campbell's Company is. I would keep the 155 years of brand equity myself. Let's talk a little bit about seasoning carbon steel. I put up a video on the best oils to use to season carbon steel, and I went through 5 of them. Grapeseed, canola, vegetable, peanut, and sunflower. And I said those were great oils to get started with. Let's see, HEP Jeff, wrote in and asked, thanks for the info, and it says he mainly uses grapeseed oil for seasoning, but how do you feel about seasoning pastes or waxes like Jed over at Cook Culture recommends? I haven't used Jed's wax, but I have used Crisby Stick, Crisby Wax, and the Buzzy Wax, and I think those products work very nicely. However, I just would not use them when you're brand new to carbon steel. Wait a month or so and then use one of those waxes. Go with one of the 5 I recommended to get started. Once you know your pan, you know how to cook in it, you seasoned it a time or two, then move to some of the more exotic products if you want to. Let's see, I've made paella 3 times since the last Pancast, and I've kind of upgraded my paella game here, and I want to do a couple of little mini reviews. First up is this guy. This is a little mortar and pestle, GreenCo. No moving parts. It's pretty easy to do a mini review on it. I like a bigger mortar and pestle for more bulk tasks, like grinding a bunch of peppercorns for pepozo or steak au poivre. I got this little guy for just like a pinch of spices. So if I want to grind up my saffron for my paella, this little guy, you just use a pinch of saffron. This guy works pretty well. So the GreenCo Mortar and Pestle is granite or marble. I think it was definitely less than 15 bucks. I think it was less than 10 bucks. So I like it and it works well. Then again, it's a mortar and pestle, not much to it. Also this Zulai or Zulay, it's spelled Zulay, but I think pronounced Zulai. Garlic press and peeler. First, this little garlic peeler. There's a little, oh, I don't know what you call it, little bumps, I guess you would call it, in there, or posts. This is made out of silicone, and you put garlic in here and you roll it, and it takes a couple of cloves to get the hang of it. But once you do, you kind of press down and roll it. It does a fantastic job of peeling garlic. And the press itself, I like it because it has little posts here and they go fully through the little holes. And does a good job of pressing the garlic all the way through. I was going to give this a pure thumbs up. I give it a thumbs up for performance, but I've noticed these little pieces of the handle have fallen off. And it doesn't really affect the performance of it. Doesn't even really affect the grip of it. But I'm going to give it a thumb sideways on build quality, but at about $8 for a peeler and press set, you get what you pay for. So $8, I think is still a pretty good deal. Let's talk about paella pans for just a moment. Now, 2 of the paellas I made were on the stovetop, on my gas cooktop upstairs. And I used this guy, cooking inside, 15-inch Lodge carbon steel paella pan. I don't think I would go any bigger than a 15-inch for cooking on a stovetop. I found that on the gas cooktop, I had to be very active, moving this guy around. It's much wider than my burner, and I had to rotate the pan and move it to keep that gas flame and make sure underneath all parts and make sure everything cooked evenly, but actually produced very good socarrat, this Lodge pan. Also, I did my first cook in this 22-inch enameled paella pan, and I learned a couple of things. The first is that I used this one on a burner out on my deck, and that burner came with a 20-inch pan. I was a little bit worried about going up to a 22. I learned that the 22 was just fine on that burner, and I could probably go up to a 24 or maybe even a 26, and everything would still work just fine. And also note the darker color of this enamel pan, much darker than the stainless steel, obviously, and also the carbon steels I've been using. It's a little bit more difficult to see if you're developing a fond and whether it's getting a little too done or not. So you got to really keep an eye on that. I had one little spot where sometimes you want some sticky bits and you kind of deglaze those and incorporate those, and they give you a lot of flavor. You don't want any of those sticky bits to actually burn. So I had one little spot where I thought they got a little toasty, but I couldn't really see it. So I'll have to pay a little more attention to that next time. And also, one of the problems that people like me making the Gringo Paella use, these are big wide pans. You think, well, I can put more and more ingredients in there. We tend to stuff, or at least I do. One of the mistakes I make is overloading the pan. And you can do that even with a big pan like this. I went with just 2 cups of rice in this huge pan. And I thought even that might be a little bit too much rice. So paella, you want a thin layer of rice. If you're an American making paella, just make sure you don't overload your pan. So a couple of quick affiliate updates. Debouille let me know that the Mineral Bee Pros are back in stock. They have been coming and going over and over. It seems like for over a year now. So sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. I don't want to sound like Donald Rumsfeld here, but if you see something, buy something. If you see a pan and it's a price you like and it's been coming and going, jump on it, not just Debouille, but with any cookware, especially if it's on sale. Also over at Falk, they got that Try Me deal on the copper saute pans, 155 bucks roughly for those guys, screaming deal there. I tried one and that is the most used pan in my kitchen. All right, links to all relevant information will be below. Thank you for watching and we'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's Pancast.